Welcome everybody to Access User Groups meeting of SQL Server with Access. This is your host, Juan Soto. Tonight we got a great topic for you. We got SQL Server Migration Assistant. And boy, does this topic really is near and dear to my heart. The fact is it saves us hours and hours of time when we migrate databases to SQL Server. Robert Aaron is my co-host and online moderator. If you can't hear me, which I believe somebody already said they can't hear me, Robert, if you can reach out to them via text, let me know. Use the chat feature WebEx to indicate if you have any issues or if you have any questions. Please do that in chat as well. Yeah, let me bring up my chat window so I can see. All right. Good. So welcome, everybody. It looks like we got a great turnout tonight. Welcome, everybody. I appreciate it. If you can tell me where you're from in the chat and the comments there, that'll be great. What's the city, country are you from in the chat? I appreciate that. I always like to know where my audience comes from. All right. We have somebody from San Francisco. Welcome, man. SQL Server Migration Assistant is a technology developed by Microsoft that allows anybody to be able to migrate data easily to SQL Server. In the old days, before we had this assistant, it really was a laborious process. You had to create your tables in SQL Server or use SQL Server's own import feature, which is not as good as the migration assistant, to be honest. But you could bypass the migration assistant and use SQL Server's import feature. One of the things that you're going to have to do is install the assistant, and Microsoft does not make it easy to find it. And so I've got a really nice link here for you, which is here, and I'll be uploading this document to you guys. And let me just copy this URL for you right now in the comments here in the chat window. And the reason I say that they don't make it easy to find, if I go into Microsoft here, and if you go to the Microsoft Download Center and put in SSMS Access. Now, the way you get to the Download Center is I usually go and I type in Microsoft.com and Microsoft and then Downloads. That usually gets me a link to the Download Center right here. And then I'll type in SSMA. Now, there are several versions of SSMA. You can use it not just for Access, but also Oracle and MySQL and Sybase. So really handy if you want to migrate from other platforms as well. And when you type in SSMA for Access, you're presented with several choices. Now, a clear indicator of which one you should take is if you go by the date and the version number. You know, sometimes you might think, oh, this one doesn't have a version number. Maybe this is the most recent one. Well, if you look at the date, it was released in 2006, so that's not good. And so if you look down here, of course, you'll see that the version 6 here was the most recent date, and this is the one you need to download and install. All right, so make sure you get the version 6. Now, the older version, this version 6 also works with older versions of Access, so you don't have to get 5.3 if you're thinking about importing a 2000 or 2002, 2003 database from Access. Just get the latest version, version 6, that will be compatible. Another aspect of installing and get this up and running is, the other day I was at a university here in Chicago, and I'm developing an endowment system for them to keep track of all the billions of dollars. Right now, they got $10 billion under management, and they asked me to develop a system in Access with SQL Server backend to keep track of the daily transactions. So these daily transactions, they get, people donate $100 million, or they'll donate $100,000 or $23,000 worth of stock. All those transactions go through my system. And so in that case, I started developing with Access backend, and they gave me a virtualized server, and we use SQL Server Express. When I go and run the SQL Server Migration Assistant, it tells me no version of Access is installed. So when you have a situation like that, you got a couple of choices. Number one, you can install the Runtime 2013, which is the complete Access front end that will allow you to run Access apps, or you can do what I did, which is install only the engine. So the engine only will get you going there. So it'd be really handy if you need to install this in a more restricted environment and IT is like, oh, we're not going to install Access on our server. I said, oh, no, we don't need the Access. We need the engine, right? And this goes without saying, but you're going to need a copy of SQL Server, right? I mean, the whole point of this discussion is you're uploading to SQL Server. So if you don't have SQL Server running, and then if you, this content will be available later on at accessusergroups.org / the SQL Server group. We'll usually get updated within the week. Somebody was asking there. So you can use this with the latest version. So I think there might be some issues with the version you pick versus the SQL Server you're going to upgrade to, right? So you want to make sure that you pick the right version of SSMA for the version. I picked the version 60 because I was working with SQL Server 2012, but it also worked SQL Server 14. All right, so once you install the SSMA, now you're ready to launch it. Now, there's a couple things here you need to keep in mind. Is that when you install SQL Server Migration Assistant, you have two choices. You have the 64-bit, which doesn't say the 64-bit. Then you got the 32-bit. So you want to run the version that works for you in your case, and it's based on, of course, the version of SQL Server you install, 32, 64, and so forth. So I believe I have SQL Server 2013 here installed, and then you get, if this doesn't work, we'll launch the other one, the 2014. And you can tell because it won't connect to your SQL Server, you have the wrong version, so we'll see this shortly. So before I do this, I'm going to go and grab a fresh copy of Northwind database. I'm going to install, I'm going to run 2013, and I'm going just to pick any of the, I can pick any of these databases. I really don't need to pick just Norton. I like the Northwind database because it's got a lot of data in there. People are familiar with it. But let me see if I can bring that up. There was a point here I can just, I had it on here, but let me just search for it. There we go. This is the 2007 version. So I'll just hit Launch Documents and I'll just put it here. Doesn't matter. We're only gonna modify this and play this for a little bit because you can see some of the great features of SQL Server Migration Assistant. And from now on, I'll just say SSMA, AUG March meeting. All right. So I typed in Northwind and Access 2013. It went and downloaded for me. Now it's here. It's preparing the template and it's creating the backend file with the. It's actually this is all one file, right? And so now if you come in here, you'll see under tables all the data and here. So I can do that. Let me just go by object type and then select tables. So here I got all my tables and now I'm ready for SQL Server Migration Assistant to come in and upload this to my SQL Server. All right, so as you know, I typed in AUG March meeting here. I'm going to close the Access file now that I've got a sample database I can play with. And now I'm ready to do the Migration Wizard. I like using the Migration Wizard. We're going to go through some configuration settings. For the most part, this does work well out of the box. I do change a couple of things. So here I'm going to click on Next. So I'm going to do this with the wizard and then without the wizard so you guys can see how you can fine-tune what you're going to do. And then I'm just going to name my project. And this is built on .NET Studio, so you have a little bit of .NET vibe to it, right? Now, if you've never used SSMA, please let me know in the comments there if this is something that you've never used. I'm going to migrate to SQL Server 2012. Let me just double check what version of SQL Server I have installed here. I deal with so many projects and I just lose track of what I have on my own PC here. So SQL Server Management Studio. Let me launch that. Okay, so I do have 2012. So I'll leave it here as 2012, and I'll connect to this. But you can pick the version of SQL Server. So this is great, right? It allows you to use multiple versions of SQL Server, and the latest version, version 6, does allow you to migrate to SQL Azure, which is great. And we actually used that before in the past. Now, why would you migrate to SQL Azure? Well, one of our specialties at IT Impact is creating web-enabled Access databases. And what we mean by that concept is you still use Access as your front end, but your backend is in the cloud somewhere. So we have a SQL Server farm that we maintain and host, and then we also, our clients may decide to go with their own SQL with Azure, right? And so with Azure, you got that nifty little thing there. So migrate to Azure. So I'm going to go ahead and pick the AUG March meeting file I just downloaded off the web, so I haven't changed anything of it. Click on open. So I've added this to the project. And now what it does is, you notice it's analyzing the database, both tables and queries. And doing this. Okay, so now it's already pre-selected some stuff, the tables, right? Now what will happen here is if I click on queries, it'll also create views against those queries. Usually we don't do that. Usually we don't do a mass migration of queries, but I'll pick this anyway. And there's several gotchas with the queries. The only issues with the queries is if you have, for example, a function that's used in the queries, and this one I don't know if it has any queries. Let me check it does. Okay. If you have a custom function used in the query, it's not going to migrate to SQL Server, right? It's not that powerful. There are products on the web that you can use that will convert your queries over, regardless if they have functions or temp bars or anything like that, and do a wonderful job. But that's beyond the scope of this presentation. But you can, if you find yourself doing, with you want a much better tool than the free one provided by Microsoft, you can go virtual license. There are many products out there in the market that do a great job. I've never used any of them. I've seen them and I've play around with them, but never use them. You say you stick to the SQL Server migration system. All right, so once I selected my objects in the database, I'm ready to now connect to my server. So obviously you're going to need a login to your server, right? So I'm going to pick a new database here. And in order to do that, I probably need to create that on my server first. So let me go back to SQL Server Migration, SQL Server Management Studio, go into databases. I'm going to create a new database, and I'm just going to call it AUG March 2015 demo. Click on OK. Now, obviously, when you're on the same PC as the migration assistant, both the SQL Server and migration on the same PC, that's the ideal condition, right? Because then you're not dealing with connectivity issues, you're not dealing with ports, the security concerns that sometimes SQL Server is locked tight at our clients, and it can be a real pain trying to connect to it. In the case of the university, for example, they have firewalls at each building. I had to request to have, SQL Server was one building, the department that I'm working with is another building. I had to request them to wait a few days for them to open ports, just so I can see the database from SQL Server Migration Assistant. So here I have my database. Now I'm at AUG March 2015 demo. Yeah, I didn't make a copy, so a little tip here is you can press F2, press Control C, and then go into Migration Assistant, and then paste that in there. So I'm going to mute the microphone here, guys, just because it's easier.
Tyler, I think we might have to do this. So
if you can mute yourself, that'd be great. I don't want to mute everybody, but let's see.
Oh, pretty good.
Oh, yeah, that's me. Hi.
Kind of fell asleep. Kids are just upstairs hanging out.
I'm glad the kids are upstairs.
Oh, I guess you didn't go. I'm not sure what happened. I forgot about that.
What? Did you go?
Yeah, I guess not.
All right. As much as I enjoyed hearing about the kids, and we're going to mute everybody there, and then I'll meet you again when we get started with the Q&A. Meanwhile, you can still do some texting there or chat. All right, so here I selected my database in my server. Obviously, if I go drop down here, it may or may not pick it up because I haven't gone there. So if I go back and then click next, now it may show up. We'll see. Now it doesn't, so I'll just go ahead and paste it in there. I'm using Windows Authentication. I'm not going to go into too much detail about how to use a SQL Server name and so forth, but you know, that can be its own chat. All right. So here is an interesting capability. Now, when we develop Access solutions with SQL Server backends, we use what's called DSN list tables. And if you want to learn more about DSN list tables, you can go into my website, and here you can go to Start Here. So accessexperts.com/start here. And there's a wide range of topics to get you started with SQL Server. One of them is how to create DSN list tables in the four-part series. So this option that we're presented by the migration assistant, we probably wouldn't check this because we don't do it. But if I wanted to, I can click link tables, and then it'll create a new backend for me or modify the existing Next database to create links back to SQL Server. So that's kind of neat. All right, so now it's going through, and it's doing what it just says up there, right? It's converting, loading, and migrating everything over to SQL Server. And it'll give you a report, and then now it presents you with this. So here, if I click on the plus sign, you'll notice that under tables, it says, okay, well, we found these tables in Access right here on the right-hand side, but we haven't found them in SQL Server. So obviously, it's going to create all these tables on the SQL Server end, right? And it'll do the same thing for queries. Here, they call it views. And so it says, okay, you know what? It's going to do all these interviews as well. So I'm going to click on OK. And now it's copying the data, creating the tables in SQL Server, copying the data over, and doing all this work for me while I go grab a coffee and come back. If it's a large database with a lot of data. Otherwise, it's done. All right, so one of the things that you got to be careful with this is if I click on close, trying to get back into this report is a little bit of a hassle. So I like to look at this report here with you guys so you can see what it is. It's fairly extensive, I think, and you know, it really does. I'll tell you a lot about how the migration went. So here on the queries, it had some issues with some queries, and let's see if it highlights them. And here, let me just close this other window so you can see it better. Okay. And so it says, okay, we're at the shipper extend. Let me see if I go back to the top on the queries. All right, so converted 96.3%, not converted two queries. And of course, it's not going to convert a query if it has anything in there that's not good in terms of a function, custom function, and so forth. And by the way, it actually estimates how many hours this would have taken you if you would have done this manually. So in a few minutes, I'd save myself 8 hours, allegedly. All right, so I got my errors here up here, and then it gives me my warnings as to primary keys and hyperlink convert attacks, and you know all the stuff that you can't do in SQL Server backend that you can do with Access, and then gives me some info on here. And so one of the things you need to do is obviously is look at your tables. Let me look at the tables here, and 309 tables, 116 of them were not converted, so I would need to look into them and figure this out. 25 indexes were converted to 90, 20 primary keys, 5 of them with errors. And so, you know, now the hard work comes into play. Okay, and then I've got these tables that converted over. Then, gosh, you know, what is it that's missing? What do I need to worry about? How do I address those, and so forth. So I don't want to give you the impression that by any means this is a one-click deal and you're done. Because there's a reason why we have such an active practice and people hire us, because they don't want to deal with all this subsequent error messages and issues that will come up once you convert. So notice here on the customers I have a little bit of a problem. So maybe I'll click on the plus sign here, and it says the indexes. Not converted 6. So none of these indexes got converted over for some reason. And then if I click here on city, it doesn't tell me why it was not done there, but maybe it's because I look here under my migration assistant 0 link not allow flag converted. All right. So you would go through all these and do this. Now, Northwind database is a fairly complex database, and you're going to have lots of these issues. Most of the time when we come across a database for a client, and they haven't converted to SQL Server yet. They're pretty simple at that point because, so actually they don't have the resources or know-how to make a complex Access solution. So the backend in itself is fairly simple and straightforward. A database such as Northwind and has been highly customized by Microsoft, you're going to run into all kinds of issues here with this. So obviously now the hard part is you have to go in there and make sure it does this. Now, if I go into customers, so let me go ahead and bring up customers. Hold on, I'll close this. We'll get back to this here later on. If I go into my server here and I click on this and go into customers, you'll notice that all my tables have been migrated over, except for the ones that didn't. I'm going to go into the design view. And notice that it kept the same column name as Access, because an Access also was called ID, not very good name for it. So let me go ahead and bring up Access, bring up the Northwind database that I just converted over. And if I go to Customer Design View here in Access, notice that it has auto number and ID. When I go into SQL Server, my SQL Server itself, that auto number has been automatically converted by SSMA into a identity column, which is pretty neat. So it already took care of that for me. So if you have auto number and Access, it automatically converts it over to identity and SQL Server. Furthermore, sometimes you need to start with a new seed, right? So I've seen instances where I can't start at 1. I want it to start at a certain value, so I can. That's one of my favorite features in SQL Server. It's very easy to say, you know what, I want the next record to be created in a database to start at 10,000. So I can put in that seed value in there, and now every time we add new records, it'll start at 10,000. Now, a couple of things that this database did. First of all, notice the spaces, right? So poor database design on the part of Microsoft with this database led to spaces and brackets in SQL Server. Now, if you were a developer working for me and you handed in a project like this, I would really get upset, because obviously we don't want to deal with brackets anytime. It just makes our lives a lot harder when we go to code in a database. So one of the things, of course, that you need to be aware of then is it doesn't matter how great the SSMA is if you have a poor database design. You need to fix issues in Access first. Fields with spaces, missing primary keys, functions and queries that don't belong in there. You need to take care of all that stuff first, and then you'll be ready to do SSMA. So if you jump into SSMA first without going into your Access database and fixing these issues, you're just asking for trouble later, because now it's a lot more harder. I have to go in here and manually change this. So and I usually tell my clients, I say, look, this is magnifying issues you have in Access, right? So, I saw them on the fact that SQL Server is great, it's wonderful, and the best thing that ever happened to Access. But when you have issues in Access, I tell them that gets magnified in SQL Server. So if there was a speed issue in Access before, because of poor database design, it's going to remain in SQL Server, and may even be compounded. So that's the point I'm trying to make. Now, one of the nice features of SSMA is that it doesn't happen when you do the migration import. Now I'm going to show you that feature. So for example, if I'm going to import right into this database, I can right click on the database, click on task, and here I can have an import data. You're thinking, okay, well, great, I don't need this SSMA, I can just do this, right? I can go here, select my Access database as a data source. It says, oh yeah, Access, yeah, we'll import it. But the problem with that is it's not a smart import. And so it's going to miss stuff like the identity. It's not going to do that for you. Another thing it's not going to do, which I kind of like about the SSMA, is, let me bring it up here, timestamp. The timestamp feature is added automatically for all your tables, because there's an issue with Access communicating with SQL Server unless your fields have a timestamp. And all these little things I'm pointing out to you, you can see in my post under accessexperts.com/start here under tips for Optimizing tips for creating tables and access. Tips for designing SQL Server tables and access. I go into in discussion all those issues that SSMA is taking care of for me here. I did this presentation at SQL Saturday recently, and somebody, rightfully so, told me timestamp is deprecated. It may not be used in future versions of SQL Server. Now it's called role source. I believe it's called role source or something other term in there. But timestamp works just fine. And it's just a field. If you're familiar with timestamp, the timestamp data type is just a field that's used between SQL Server and Access. You're not supposed to query against it. It's not something for you to look at. It lies behind the curtain, and don't look behind the curtain. That's basically what I'm saying about that. And actually, if you open it up in Access and look at that timestamp field, it doesn't show you anything. It's just an empty column, but there is stuff there in the background. And the issue is that Access uses that to determine if the record has been changed. When was the last time it was changed? So one of the problems that people have when they go through the manual conversion of SQL Server, or they use that right-click import data in SQL Server Management Studio, they don't have this timestamp. So they call me, says, "Oh, we can't, edit data in Access. It just says it's read-only, or it tells me that you and another user has modified, that famous message that pops up." So in order to avoid that, you got to have the timestamp. All right. Now, one of the things the SQL Server professional, and I always say this, I'm not a professional. I'm not a SQL Server expert. What I am is an expert in the interaction of Access with SQL Server. And Robert has heard me say this many times. But notice this. See this little N here in front of all these? nvarchar max. nvarchar is going to give you maximum capability, maximum flexibility, right? So if you were to build this database for a country, a foreign country, and they have weird characters, like in Spanish we have the upside down exclamation point, and all kinds of characters that are not part of the standard English language, and not part of the ANSI standard, you need nvarchar. But one of the drawbacks of that, it blows up your database, because nvarchar takes more space in your hard drive and more memory than varchar does. So let's go ahead and address that. I'm going to go back to my SQL Server Migration Assistant here. And so if you don't, what I urge you to do is before you do your first migration is actually go into Tools and then Global Settings. And here you'll be able to modify, I guess it's not here. Let me see, login now. Let me see, let me just go into Tools, Project Settings, Default Project Settings, there we go, okay. So here in the default project settings, you can modify things and it'll stick, right? So one of the things I can do is, in type mapping here, is come in here and change it from when there's a text, I can come in here and edit this. And by the way, thanks to Robert for that. Yeah, the default import doesn't deal with Access HTTP. And then change this to varchar. So that's the first thing I always do when I do a new SQL Server Migration System install, is I don't do the wizard. I go in here and modify my default project settings, and I do the varchar. Click on OK, and then I click on Apply, and then next time I do a project, obviously it's too late for this one, but next time I do a project, it'll default everything to varchar. Another nice thing that the wizard does that may escape people who don't know any better is, let me see if I can find a table that has one of these, is a in Access we have the yes/no field. Well, there is no yes/no field or Boolean field in SQL Server. Rather, you can use the bit field. And there is some controversy among Access developer. Armin Stein will tell you. Armin, who is a owner of JStreet Technology, a lot of you guys know him, will tell you, oh, we never use bit field. We rather use another type of field. I don't mind using bit fields. I like them. I use them. But if we had any of these with a bit field, let me see if I can look at the columns. I can determine that. The SQL Server Migration Assistant will automatically make it a bit field, and then from there, Oh boy, when I see this, I get nervous right away. All right, so let's go ahead and see if I can find one. If not, I'll just tell you basically what happens is that the SQL Server migration system converts to the bit, and one of the problems that you have with bit fields and SQL Server and Access is if you don't default the value to 0 on the field, then it's going to cause you problems in saving records. So for example, if I come in here and I say this is employees, and I'll say inactive, right? So inactive is a good field to have an employee table. Now I'm going to say bit. And there's two things you need to watch out for. You want to make sure you uncheck the allow nulls, so it's always there's always a value present, and you're putting a 0 here for default value. And the wizard does that. I just don't have an example of that here. So when I save this, it'll make sure that it does that for you. So that's another advantage of using the wizard. So you want to be able to come in here into default project settings and be able to customize it to your needs and your particular set of circumstances, right? It could be that when you see yes, no field here, which let me see if I can find it here. So Boolean, here you go. Here, Boolean, it'll default it to bit. And you may want to decide to do something else. No, I want this to be integer, or small integer, or tiny integer, whatever the case may be. When you default it to anything other than bit, then you don't have to worry about the default value 0. You got some other issues in there involved. Okay, one of the nicer features about SQL Server is that the newer version of SQL Server, I believe starting with 2012, is you got the datetime 2, and you'll see that here. It defaults date to datetime 2. And that's what we use when you have available. If that's not available, you have an older version of SQL Server, regular datetime is fine. But whenever you have datetime 2 available, make sure you do that. Hold on a second. Let me close the office door so you don't hear the dog. I'm on the phone. All right, sorry about that. So always use datetime 2 if that's available. Otherwise, datetime is fine. What you don't want to use in SQL Server is regular small date or date only. That's prevalent in older versions of SQL Server. It causes all kinds of problems. Okay, so you just go down through the list here and make your changes as needed. Like for example here, I need to make this a varchar. So varchar max, right? When there's a memo and so forth. Same thing here. I thought this stuff right there, I did already. Maybe I didn't save it. So varchar length. All right. So I got my varchars taken care of. Good. We're going to apply. All right. There's some other settings here. I'm not going to go into depth here, but you get the picture. Very flexible. All right. So let's talk about one neat feature of the SSMA that's not readily apparent. Let's talk about a client that hires you to do an upgrade for a database that they have that's currently in production, right? They gave you a call. And Robert and Richard, you guys have always been through all this. You know what I'm talking about. Somebody might call you and say, hey, we understand you guys are great at converting to back extract in the SQL Server. And so what you want to do there is you want to help them out, right? So they already have an X database in place. It's mission critical. And this migration to SQL Server is going to take you a while, whether it be days or weeks, right? You got to create the database in SQL Server. Then you got to run the SSMA to create the database for you. Then you have to convert the queries or the views. Then you need to do testing, because if you convert to SQL Server, that doesn't mean everything's going to be hunky-dory. Actually, some functionality may be slower. It's not the panacea that some people make it out to be. And so you need to sometimes make some changes in the database design, and on it goes. But finally, you have it all ready, and now you're ready to do alpha testing, right? And so the client says, you call the client up and say, hey, we are ready to do alpha testing. And so, okay. They say, okay, good. So you hand it over to them, and they call you back and say, hey, Juan, can you upload the latest data? Because it's hard for us to test once we have the latest data. Now, in the old days, if you tried to do this, you had to create lots of scripts to migrate the data over again and again. With SQL Server Migration Assistant, you no longer have to do that. So I'm going to give you an example of that. So I'm going to go here, File, Save Project. Right, I'm going to give that. Yeah, I always tell it to save with the metadata. Let me just close Access to the safe side before I do this. Okay, so I close that. Now I'll click on Save. All right, so I did this SQL Server Migration Assistant. Several days or weeks later, I'm ready to upload their latest data. So what I do is I open the SQL Server Migration Assistant, I load this project, and then notice that there's a couple things up here at the top, and that is you can add data, find data, reconnect the SQL Server, convert load, right? And then there's a series of options here, and one of them that I like to do is be able to run the wizard again, right? So I want to be able to run this wizard in order to do this. Let me go ahead and cancel this, load my project again. Recent projects. Okay. In here, what I'm going to do is I'm going to close this project. Let me close this project. Go into Access, add some new data to it. So here's what I'm doing. Okay. So I'm going to go into Access. I'm going to bring up my recent project. Where's my recent project? Here we go. I want to do that. So let me just close out of this thing and open it up again directly. Let's see here, documents. That's my OneDrive. Documents. All right. I'm going to load the employees database. Okay, so I'm going to add a new employee, right? So the company will be the same. And there's a shortcut key where you can just do Control apostrophe. It'll copy the same record that was above it. And then I'll do Soto and then 1. Not sure what's default here, but you get the picture. Now I've added this, right? So that's what's going to happen. When you grab a copy of your client's database the first time around and you upload it to SQL Server, as soon as you grab that copy, it's obsolete because they're going to, obviously if it's a production database, they're going to be adding records to that. So I've added this one Soto. So now I'm going to go ahead and close this. I'll say no to that. It's actually because I changed the width of the field, right? So if I come in here and I do a quick query on my employees, select top 1,000 rows, obviously I'm not in there yet, right? So now I'll go into the Migration Assistant. Close this, don't need this anymore. Open my project up. And now here, what I can do is tell it to refresh from database, right? So I'm going to do this, and it's going to analyze my Access tables and my Access data, and then it's going to re-upload anything. So now refresh operation is complete. I'm going to go back to SQL Server, and I rerun this, and and here I am not. So what? Give me a second here. So I thought that would be enough, but apparently I need to do something else here. I thought refresh from database. Let's see here. My wife just came into the house. Of course, the dogs are really excited about it. Yep. I just did something, a mistake. So what I meant to say is that you can upload the data again if everything was okay, right? In other words, sometimes you can't do this, right? You can't refresh the data. Refresh some data, migrate data. Here we go. Let's see if I do that. With authentication, okay. Table customers, all right. All data in the table will be deleted, right? So continue. So it's going to erase the SQL Server table data and then migrate everything over. So now if I do this execute, here I am. So now It's a nice way of doing if you didn't, if it were a perfect world, right? In a perfect world, if you didn't modify the access table database extensively, then this should work great. I mean, we do use it that way. And that's why you need to address issues with performance and access first, because you may need to add additional indexes and additional fields, right? If I did the SMA first, and then I realized later, oh my gosh, this is a complete mess, this database, and I do exchange to the database, this may not work correctly because the assumption here is that the schema, the queries and tables match the ones that you originally created in the SQL Server. That's option number one. Option number two is, what end up happening most of the time is, we use the SSMA to upload their latest data to a new database on SQL Server called Beta. So we'll have a second database here called AUG March 2015 Demo Beta. Let the SSMA crunch that database, upload the data. Then we'll use queries to migrate the data from one SQL Server database to the next. That's the more difficult road. And we do that because there was just too many changes to between the time we ran the SSMA the first time to the second time when we do the data migration for Alpha. And then obviously you're going to hand it over to the client. They're going to be happy because they're going to see the latest data in the database. And then they come back and they give you some changes. You modify the database. You get the beta. Once you get the beta, guess what? They want to see the latest data again. So you got to run the SSMA, update the refresh the data one more time. And they do testing and you make some changes and all that to the code and maybe to the SQL Server database. Now they're ready to roll out. Well, before you roll out, you may have to roll out, for example, if it's a factory, they might say, oh no, we need you to roll out Friday at 10 o'clock p.m. That way you have Saturday and Sunday correcting the issues and then Monday we launch. Well, guess what? When you roll out, you got to do again. You have to refresh the data again in your SQL Server database. So this is all happening because they have a current database that's in production. So alpha, beta, rollout, you got to run this SSMA multiple times to get the data into the SQL Server, the latest data. And there's two ways about it. You can have it refreshed yourself, or you can create a second database and then use queries to update one database to the other. And we can get into a lot of discussion about alpha, beta. In fact, that probably would be a good topic for next month, how to migrate a database and what the procedures that we recommend to go through alpha, beta, finally rollout. And, you know, one of the things the rollout plan is you need to have a contingency in place, and then for beta testing, you need the beta plan in place, and we can talk about that in next month's topic. If you'd like me to talk about that next month, let me know in the comments if you'd like to see that next month or hear about me talking about that next month. Let me know. All right, so the last thing I want to show you, this neat little feature, is if I add a column to a table. So just like you can refresh the data, I can also add a column to a table, and it'll also add it to SQL Server. So I'll come in here and I'll just do a test column. And make sure, and you know what I'll do is I'll make it a bit field. Test bit. Yes, no. Thanks, Robert, for that feedback. And thanks, AN, for that too. So here I'm going to do this, and I'm going to save this. And now I'm going to close my Access database. Come into SQL Server. SQL Server Migration Assistant. And then I'm going to right-click on the tables and convert, load, and migrate again. And ask me, okay, it's already says you want to do this. So you can do a complete wipeout. Now, that's not good if you, after you do the SMA, which happens with us, you know, we made changes to the SQL Server database. So I'm not going to do this again because it'll overwrite all the great changes I made. But if nothing changed, and all you do is add a field, you can just run it over and over again, and that will convert it over. So I'm just going to hit overwrite all. And it'll do this. So you don't have to delete the database in SQL Server, recreate it. It'll automatically do this. And there may be options in here, and I haven't done a good job of it. Maybe because mostly we don't do this. We'd rather just do it once and be done with it. But I'll go ahead and do the OK this. And it does the migration. And we'll just go ahead and bring up the employee table again in design view. All right, that's done. Now we'll go ahead and bring up this in design view. Yeah, let's see. There is the bit that I originally did in there. Didn't do the test bit. So let me just refresh this again. Yeah, make sure that I do a refresh. Tables, refresh. Close that, close that. I thought I added to employees. Let me just double check. Was it employees I added to? I thought I had a test bit in there somewhere. This is what happens when I talk and walk at the same time. All right, so if I added a field in Access, I just rerun the table. It'll update my graded data. So maybe I picked the wrong table. I don't remember which one I added the test field to. But let me see if I can determine that by opening up again in Access and using the database window here. I can sort this by date, time, modified date and time. And then today, okay, so maybe it was customers. Let me just look at this real quick. No, I thought I did. Let me just do it again. So this time I'm going to do a test bit. Yes, no. Save it. Close in. Table relationships, good question. You know, table relationships is nothing more than constraints, right? So you can say before you can have a record and order details, you need to have it in orders. Right, so when you have that, you're actually adding constraints to the table design access and should get reflected in SQL Server. All right, so I did that. Let me go back in here and rerun this again one more time. Let me see what other options I have here. I got migrate data, convert, load, and migrate, advanced object. So I only need to do the customer table. So let me right-click on the customer table, convert, load, and migrate, just the customer table. All right, and then click on OK. And that was a lot faster. Now when I come in here, SQL Server, I refresh this and see if this worked now. I just love it when the computer makes me look bad. All right, columns. And I'm obviously doing something wrong because I don't see it here in the test bit. Let me just refresh this. Go to my columns collection. For some reason it's not showing up here. I'm not going to get into too much into this, but gosh darn. All right. So it should, obviously I'm doing something wrong here, but if you add columns to your Access database, it should migrate over to with the SQL Server Migration Assistant. Okay, so I'm going to open up to questions now, everybody. So I'm going to unmute your mic. And thank you very much for being at the presentation. I'm going to open it up. If you have any questions regarding tonight's topic, or if you have any comments you'd like to share with me.
I found that there's no reason to create a new database when you're doing the migration. It'll create it for you.
Yeah, it should do it for me. I ran into a technical glitch there, and I had to create the data, so it should create it automatically for you. You're right, Robert. Thanks, Sam, for your question. Richard, same thing. Richard, appreciate that. Thank you very much for the feedback. I hope this helps you out a lot because it's not the panacea that Microsoft led you to believe. There are a lot of gotchas involved, but I'm hoping this will get you started so that you can start using it with your projects. It is a time saver. Don't make you understand me. All right, Jeff is saying, is there anything I would need to do differently if I have an active SharePoint Access Services database? Well, that's a different animal, Jeff. I'm glad you asked me that question. SharePoint, obviously, a SharePoint Access database is stored in SQL Server already, so you would not necessarily use the SSMA to migrate that data to another database server. You probably use another technique to migrate from one server to the next.
This is Jeff. That was my question, but what if it's a SharePoint 2010 Access Services database, so it's stored in SharePoint lists, but you want to convert it over to SQL 2012?
Yeah, fortunately, there is no SSMA for the SharePoint to SQL Server does. Unfortunately, I haven't seen one. I could be wrong, but I haven't seen one. There is a blog here for SQL Server Migration Assistant Team blog. Lots of great information. You may want to see this here, but as you can tell, they're focused on Oracle. They're focused on the competition, right? They want you to migrate from Oracle, Sybase, MySQL, or Access over to SQL Server. There's nothing here for SharePoint, unfortunately. Thank you, Jeff, for that question. Do you have a large implementation in SharePoint right now, Jeff?
Yeah, we have 2 medium-sized databases in SharePoint 2010 that we want to upgrade to SharePoint 2013.
Okay. All right. So the problem with that is not only do you have to migrate the data, but the technology was scrapped and redone all together. So now you need to factor into your migration plan. You have to redo all of those web forms when you migrate to 2013 SharePoint. If you want to take advantage of the latest features, I'm thinking you would, because that 2010 Access for the Web was version 1.0 of the web, I call it, and it wasn't the most flexible or the best. The newer version, it really is far and above better than what we had in 2010. Having said that, I still haven't had too much work on those using 2012 X2012 web forms, because it's just limiting. One recent development that I like to make you aware of is now they've opened it up where you can use JavaScript. So that's going to make it much more powerful if you migrate to 2012 as well. Before they had you in a sandbox, and you can only use data macros. But with the newest version, my understanding is now you can use JavaScript. And if you need more information on that, you can probably paying my colleague Ben Clothier, who's the one that specializes in SharePoint with Access and SQL Server. All right. Any other questions or comments before we go? So it looks like we're going to do that topic next month on how to plan a migration over to SQL Server next month.
Great.
Robert and I were just recently involved in one of these. Next month, we're looking, the second Tuesday would be the 14th. And I'm going to be on vacation in Puerto Rico, so when we do this on the 14th, you're going to hear all the nightlife in the background, roosters, frogs going off and everything. That's going to be fun. And good. So if there is no other questions, I'd like to thank everybody who came out today. Wow, you guys really showed up en masse. I appreciate that. And we do this out of labor of love. Oh, something I forgot to say is we're hiring. So if you would like to join the best darn team in the planet, please keep in mind, all you have to do is go to our website and submit your resume. Over here, go to accessexperts.com/jobs, and you get to work with these beautiful women in these pictures. So that's always a plus. Or these handsome gentlemen here, if you're a woman, right? And then the other thing is that we've got 2 conferences going on in Europe this summer. We have the conference in Denmark that I'm putting on with Anders. It's called Discover the Power of Your Data. Microsoft, Accenture Group, and IT Impact are co-sponsoring this. So please, if you would love to travel to Europe and expense it to attend my conference, I would love to see you there. The other one is, I know Richard might show up, maybe even Robert. The other one is in Spain. We're doing the whole thing in Spain as well. So we'll do Spain the last week of May, and then Denmark the first week of June. So please help me promote these events. I know you may not be going, but if you can retweet. That's the other thing I want you to do. If you want to help me out and thank me for this, please retweet. Follow me on Twitter. Follow me on LinkedIn. Go into the LinkedIn group for SQL Server. Maybe put a comment on there if you like it or not like it. Yeah, we're going to go to Copenhagen, and then from there we're going to Amsterdam, my wife and I, which is asking me. So, but we would love to be able to tonight or tomorrow when you get a chance, as soon as possible, tweet how great an event it was, how much you learned, so people can say, "Gosh, I wish I was there," because it sounded like it was a wonderful presentation. Just because we want to get traction, right? We want to be able to grow the group, get more people. Tonight we had great attendance. We're all out here. We got, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 people. That's a great turnout. So I appreciate that. But yeah, if you go into LinkedIn, we have the LinkedIn Access User Group, SQL Server LinkedIn Group. Let me just bring it up here real quick. I know you guys got to go maybe, but bring it up here. True groups, interest, and MS Access with SQL Server. This is the name of the group. If you're not a member of this, please apply and join us on that group. And then there, you'll see a blog post. And then here you want to leave a comment or like it. And then obviously a comment would be great. Or retweet it. I'm at jsoto22. And thank you very much, everybody, for coming out. And we'll see you next month when I'm in Puerto Rico.